Hey there, everyone. It's Gigi Sober Sun. February 24th, AA Thought for the Day. When we came to our first AA meeting, we looked up at the wall at the end of the room and saw the sign, "But for the grace of God." We knew right then and there that we would have to call on the grace of God in order to get sober and get over our soul sickness. We heard speakers tell how they had come to depend on a power greater than themselves. That made sense to us, and we made up our minds to try it. Am I depending on the grace of God to help me stay sober? Well, yeah, initially, I don't recall hearing mention of God in my first meetings. But when I did, I kind of rolled my eyes and thought, oh, here we go. Because of my religious experiences growing up and my fear of God, my belief that God was mad at me, I tried to block God out of my life. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing, of course, at the time. So I was just resentful at God, I guess. Mainly resentful at religious people. And I had cause for that, really. You know, it was, you might call it justifiable resentment or justifiable anger. But, you know, and because I had some religious experiences where they compelled you to cry, basically, and mourn and weep for all the bad stuff you did, and it seemed to be that was the focus more than anything. Like, that was the only way to change your mind about something, was to show an outward manifestation of your just shittiness, for lack of a better term, right? But in AA, I had already made connections. I like the people in AA, and I wanted them to like me. And I think that's more what my experience was than, oh, I'm going to have to turn to the grace of God. You know, it was just when they mentioned God, and my initial reaction was eye rolling kind of thing, like, oh, they're going to compel me to admit I'm powerless and that I'm a sinner and that I need to, you know, change my ways or I'm going to hell kind of thing, which is all really kind of performance based and trying to force a spiritual, quote unquote, experience rather than just focus on a relationship with, you know, like plugging into a power source that's going to give me more than just power, but peace and wisdom and love, a love source, you know? And so that's that saying, but for the grace of God, it's not, that's selling it short. That's cutting it short, that statement. But for the grace of God, there go I, right? But for the grace of God, I'd be doing the same thing. But for the grace of God, I wouldn't be sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd be lost, completely lost in my alcoholism. But God saw through all of that to bring me to AA, and AA brought me to a loving God through the connections, the friendships, the acceptance that I received in AA. So when that word came up, even though my initial response was to roll my eyes and think about bolting, just getting out of there, I thought, I like these people. I like how they're willing to share their crap for it to be fertilizer for my life, and it seems to help them as well. They seem to be more well adjusted to their life circumstances than I am. So maybe I'll just sit here and shut the heck up and leave my mind open to what they have to say. And that's when God came in, a concept of God. And God met me where I was emotionally and spiritually, and didn't kick the door in like so many religious people try to portray God. Kick the door in and say, turn or burn, buddy. You either turn toward God or you're going to burn in hell. In other words, change your ways. I can't, right? There's a version of the Serenity Prayer that goes, God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, the one I can, heck, I can't change myself, right? Most of the time, not by myself. I can't grit my teeth and clench my fists and will myself to stop, habitual behaviors. I have to trust in a power greater than myself and ask, please remove this. And that's in the 6-step prayer. God, please remove from me every single defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. And that, I am now ready that you should have all of me, good and bad, is before that. But for the grace of God, there go I. But for the grace of God, I wouldn't know this. But for the grace of God, I wouldn't even have an opportunity to open my mind, right? Like I'd be so consumed by my own desires or my own habits that I wouldn't even see that I can't do it. That's what but for the grace of God means to me. And if it's not obvious already, I do depend on the grace of God to help me stay sober. That was the question, that last question. Meditation for the day. Share your love, your joy, your happiness, your time, your food, your money gladly with all. Give out all the love you can with a glad, free heart and hand. Do all you can for others, and back will come countless stores of blessings. Sharing draws others to you. Take all who come as sent by God and give them a royal welcome. You may never see the results of your sharing. Today, they may not need you, but tomorrow may bring results from the sharing you did today. And, my first instinct, my first thought that comes up, much like, my eye roll when the mention of God was first heard in AA from me, the notion that I share everything, my time, my food, my money gladly with all is, well, yeah, it's going to draw people to me. bums. It's going to draw bums to me. And, I've had people, try to bum money off of me in AA meetings. And I don't doubt that their circumstances are dire. I've been there. And sometimes I've given them money. A lot of times, if I have cash on me, I'll give it to them. You know what I mean? Sometimes, for whatever reason, I'll have extra money. God money is what I call it, And then, in those cases, if somebody asks and I feel, right, in my gut that is the next right thing to do, well, I'll give it to them, right? And, if they're asking for a loan, I'm not going to loan them money. If I can't give it, I can't give it, right? So, and I don't expect it back, right? And I haven't always seen the best outcomes from that. You know what I mean? But, I've been there where I've been desperate and I had to rely on the generosity of others to get me through it. And so, again, but for the grace of God, but for the grace of God, I could still be there. It's a live and learn and love and grow in program. That's for doggone sure. Prayer for the day. I pray that I may make each visitor desire to return. I pray that I may never make anyone feel repulsed or unwanted. Yeah, and I've probably shared it before, but I got sober in Turkey, the country of Turkey, on Incirlik Air Base. And it was, there were English-speaking meetings. I never went to any of the Turkish meetings. But when I got back to my home station in England, the very first meeting I went to, it was hard to find because it was in a complex of buildings. And I came in late after How It Works was being read. And I came in the door, and the guy that was closest to the door, there was only 3 guys in there. Very, very small meeting. He stuck out his hand and smiled. And I immediately felt like I was home. Because otherwise I would have sat there and felt like, oh, is somebody going to get mad at me because I came in late? That's just where my head was at the time. But him sticking his hand out, such a small, simple thing. And I've stuck my hand out to people who, it seemed like they were just so low they could barely look me in the eye. My friend talks about people come in with their chin dragging on the ground. And, you can tell when somebody comes in beat down, even if they have to get a sheet signed, a judge's nudge to go to AA meetings and get their sheet signed and bring it to the probation officer or whatever. Some people would make a snap judgment about that and say, well, they don't want to be here. Who says? Right? I've seen plenty of people that come from jail or, have to get their sheet signed, and they end up getting it, have years of sobriety. And they were grateful that the judge insisted that they do this, right? So, if they're newcomers, stick your hand out. Welcome them. We don't love bomb people, right? We don't that's what cults do. But we can stick our hand out in a very straightforward, practical way to make someone feel welcome, right? If you go over the top with it, like if you had too many cups of coffee, you might want to leave it to somebody else to do, because we don't want to come across like we're love bombing people, because so many people think that AA is a cult anyway. You know what I mean? That's usually the what I say about that first meeting when somebody mentioned the word God. Oh, it is a cult. Here we go. You know. But, you know, Bill Wilson's, I think it's in the 12 and 12. I'm not sure where, but he talks about the Irishman, you know, whose eyes were but slits. You know, his blue eyes were peering through slits in his eyes, and he was all swollen and everything. And it was like, oh, you're trying to convert me. How dare you? And he was like, you know, I just think you're an arrogant, you know, Irishman who thinks he can run the show. And, you know, we don't charge anything. And no, I'm not trying to proselytize you, he says, you know. You probably know more about religion than I do. I'm just giving you a straightforward way, right? But if we're over the top with, you know, trying to sell a newcomer on the idea of AA, we're probably heading down the wrong road. The one 24-hour-a-day book reading that I've shared before, that I read the morning of my first talk that I gave about my story, where it says, what comes from the heart speaks to the heart. Speak from the heart. They call it the language of the heart. And I love that. You know, it comes from all humility, and it's just empathy, because we've been there. We don't have to sympathize with somebody. We can empathize with somebody. And there's a huge difference. You know, we speak from authority. Not with authority. We speak from experience, right? And we don't necessarily have to go into all of our story, but it does say in the family afterward, when it talks about families sharing their experience, in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. So let God bring to mind what you should say. Don't just try to use a formula. Because I've been there, you know, I tried to use a formula, say these words, and something will click for them. It doesn't necessarily work that way, right? And if I allow God to direct my thinking, as it says, on awakening, God direct my thinking, especially that it's divorced from self-pity, dishonest, self-seeking, resentful motives, fearful motives, right? Because sometimes when we talk to newcomers, we're fearful that we're going to say something wrong. So we try to stick to a formula rather than letting go and letting God. Letting God say what God wants to say to them through you, through us. That speaks from the heart to the heart. So thanks for letting me share, y'all. Keep coming back. Love you. Look up. Aim up. Rise up.